Well then, here we are again. And again, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be saying to you. I had asked for that list, I'd asked for in the forums, I'd asked what you would like me to talk about. And if you noticed, I put me in parentheses, because me in parentheses actually, over to you. But the reason why I asked it in such a way is because certainly during these videos I'm doing the talking. But I don't want it to be where I'm monologuing to you, even though that is somewhat the case. I would actually like for us to talk about these things. I would like for us to discuss them. I'll post the videos in that same thread, which, as we've been doing with the last couple, it should engender a sort of dialogue. So, anyway, Carlos had asked me to talk about my involvement with the Jedi Temple, how I came to Jediism. Now, I've always been one who's not very much a fan of the suffix ism. I feel that there's Jedi way. I feel that there's our way of coming to believe in the Force. But then I don't think that there's actually any sort of science about, ism means pertaining to some nebulous ideal of a Jedi. Anyway, that said, I became a Jedi in about the same way that everyone else did. It's because something about certainly the original Star Wars trilogy touched me whenever I was very young. And we don't get to these things and then they become, just a part of our identity instantly. If it interests you, Tim Lott has done a very good biographical sketch of Alan Watts. It's available on YouTube. Just type in Offbeat Zen, and it's about a 20-minute long video where Tim Lott, the author, he talks about how Alan Watts had influenced his life. Well, as it were, there's a reason why we study Watts in the temple. There's a reason why Star Wars and the iconography of the Jedi Knight was of particular appeal to me as a very young man, as a child actually, and then even beyond that, how I found that it fit in with other very diverse branches of philosophy, be it moral philosophy, analytical philosophy, phenomenology, and then of course tying that together with studies of Eastern religion, Christian mysticism, and several other disciplines, even in the hard sciences. That in and of itself showed me that there is an ubiquity to the knowledge that we can glean from our perceptions, and that has always been a fascination to me. I'm going to digress and go back to what I was saying about Tim Lott's biographical sketch of Alan Watts, and that was, it's not, it has never been permanent. It's always been something that has to be taken in, lived, experienced a bit, forgotten. Something, life just presents itself occasions where we will forget what we've learnt, and then other occasions come along to remind us. Now, this in and of itself is a very important thing to realise. When we talk about, being committed to this way of life, being committed to this mindset, being committed to these teachings, well, that has to be flexible, that has to be useful to us. Otherwise, it becomes draconian, it becomes what we might even call neuro-fascist, where we are forcing ourselves into something which is, it becomes relatively inauthentic. Now, when we talk about authenticity, that never means just saying whatever comes across your mind whenever it comes across your mind, no matter who it's going to affect. Authenticity is also very internal, it's very personal. We may have to subscribe to some kind of social protocol or a particular etiquette, conventions of relationships. That does not make them inauthentic, as long as inside ourselves we're not saying, oh, well, I have to be this way, I have to do this, or I must conform to. Conformity is always going to win. I mean, it's primordial. We are the descendants of conformers. Those who did not conform to the tribe were left to their own and they died. Those who were conformed to the tribe, well, then they had the protection of the tribe and they've lived, and so now 7,000 generations later, here we are. Now, over those 7,000 generations, we have developed storytelling. Perhaps even before then, but then, anthropologically speaking, we figure that Homo sapiens sapiens has been about for about 7,000 generations or so. That's a blink of an eye in cosmic time. But sure, I got to Jediism the same way everyone else did. I was very, very attached to the notion, the iconography, the symbol, as it were, of the Jedi Knight. Partly warrior, mostly priest. Disciplined, but discipline means learning, which means that if one is disciplined, that there's a very stupid way of being disciplined, and that is always following the same thing, ever and always, and never deviating from it. Sometimes, situationally, we have to deviate from what we have learned to learn something else. Otherwise, we become psycho-rigid, and that's not in our or anyone else's best interest. We do not grow that way. Which goes back to the notion of the living force. Life, we are all the force. Every living thing, the ecosystem, the 10,000 million species of life on Earth, and however many more else there are in the universe. The harmony of the universe, including the cycles of creation and destruction, those are all testaments. Those are all the ways that we observe the force. And we ought not make any kind of really weird hermeneutic interpretations about how we can understand that. Anyway, that's step one. I got to the Jedi temple in about the same way that everyone else has. Just my interest in the symbolic, iconographic Jedi Knight. That said, I don't play with plastic lightsabers. I think that might be fun, but I don't think that's going to foster any, better connection to the Force for me than if it were, than anything else may. Wielding a lightsaber or wielding a tennis racket, anything that gets you to, what psychology calls, the flow state, where your attention is at maximum, so that you don't even realize, the time. But that takes practice, and that's why I feel I may be, slightly qualified to talk to you about this, because I've been at it for a very long time. It's those phases of remembering this thing, studying something about it, studying, how religions, and all religions pretty much say the same thing. I mean, we're not going to talk about, particular religious texts, just because they can be very contradictory. Even in one religious text, like the Bible, there are contradictions in it. But then the Bible was also written over something like 1600 years, so you're going to have, contradictions. As Joseph Campbell says, the vices of, the virtues of yesterday have become the vices of today. The vices of yesterday have become the necessities of today. That's also very cyclic. I mean, there's the sorts of things that, come and go. They flow in, they flow out like the tides. So anyway, my path in what you would call Jediism has been very much like that. I've had to adapt to various life situations. Sometimes I adapt well, sometimes I adapt very badly. But the faith part of it, the faith aspect in the Force, and certainly in the notion of the living Force, means life presents me what I have to get through. And the faith is, I can rise with these challenges. And my life has presented me some very serious challenges for, a Western first world inhabitant, which, that I apparently have risen with those challenges. Again, sometimes better than other times, but nevertheless, there's faith there. There's faith that no matter how dismal things appear, I'll get through it. And if I don't get through it, well, then I will transform into something else. I will, simply become I will, what you call it, transforming into the Force was what Emmanuel Levinas called totality. Birth, the intermediate time, a death. That's a totalized life. And there's no more objectification possible after death. That's a good segue into another very important aspect of what I feel to be necessary for a Jedi. Certainly, it's a necessary. It's not even a knowledge. It's an intuition that our perceptions, how we feel, we are. The ego. It's not a dirty word. It merely means I, and it's that center, that focus of consciousness, which can take in so much of the environment and interact with so much of the environment, that we tend to think that we can objectify things, and we cannot. The hard sciences are not objective. The hard sciences are very subjective. They start out with curiosity. Feelings always precede thought. Now, after a feeling has engendered a thought, well then, it's our curiosity that brings, gee, that's weird. Why? How does that work? Why? And then we start investigating things, and we start finding out what things are true, and then some of the things that we thought were true before, they're no longer true, or we find out, something which is even truer, or something which makes what we thought true before utterly false. A good example of that's just the Rutherfordian atom. It's not a little billiard ball. It's actually mostly empty space with energetic particles whizzing around it. The atomic nucleus made up of quarks and all that stuff. That just even a very very short time ago we had no idea. So that's a more concrete example of why what we think is objective is subjective, and for us, where we can feel the force also very strongly, not only in the observations of the harmony with which the universe tends to hold itself together, but it's also in how we come together, our relationships, which is what I talked about before, and how we foster those relationships. The best way that's ever been explicited to do that is by intersubjectivity, where we know that the other person is another I, another ego, another someone who is curious, who wonders about things, who worries about things, who has centers of interest where their curiosity focuses itself. May not be the same centers of interest where my curiosity focuses itself, and from these different centers of interest we're going to have different discoveries. And if we're not too focused on the I, well then we can enter into that space of intersubjectivity where we are sharing our discoveries, reconciling them, making some sort of synthesis where we get even closer to something which will be true for a time until we discover other factors that alter that truth. We don't even have to say it makes it false. We just say it alters it. It feeds. It nourishes what part of truth we can actually have access to through our perceptions, and certainly through our communication. And that's where I am now, is where I feel that the force is very evident in it doesn't take a lot of sitting down with legs crossed and eyes closed meditation. A sack of rice does that. A meditation can be just that presence, no matter what's going on. Work can be a very good meditation. Art is a wonderful meditation. Any type of expression, any type, art, especially that creative. I don't know I can't remember how you say it in English, but l'élan créatif, according to Bergson. That is an expression of the force, and when that's shared, and someone else uses whatever sort of hermeneutics that they use to interpret that, well then that can be a dialogue. There can be dialogue over distance and over time, just through the expressivity of art. Let's not confuse art with entertainment. Certainly expression should be fun. A lot of the entertainment that we have now, which if we go back to Star Wars, well then we can see sort of that the way it got shifted from first of all it was George Lucas wanting to put the principles of traditional religions forward for a modern audience to grasp, and then by the time this last trilogy came out, it was Disney, and of course that those were just basically entertainment. We like things that are we are touched by things which are familiar. We also crave things which are novel, and we have to reconcile that, the familiar with the new. And since that's a mirror of life, life is self-organizing, self-renewing. We need to employ our intersubjectivity to really maximize the benefits that we can harvest from that, and share the fruits of that harvest. I'm going to close with that. I know that I have not exhausted the subject. I will never exhaust any subject of any answer to any question that you may pose. But as I said, I would like for us to have a conversation, a continuing dialogue or polylogue regarding these questions that I've been asked. And of course, like I said, I reserve myself the right to be very wrong about things, because as I said, with truth, it's true up until the point we notice that the truth is never going to be complete, and then we can always complete it with something else, and then that makes it a little closer to what's actually going on. But anyway, I'll close with that, and I will welcome your comments, your questions, your feedback, your criticisms, your complaints. May the force be with you.